It's time to welcome in Mike LaTulip for our weekly chat here on the Illini Inquirer Podcast, talking some Illini hoops. And first time in a while, Mike, we got to talk about a loss and a blowout loss at that, as Illinois loses 84-68 at number 3 Purdue. So many things to talk about from this one. Now the Big Ten race is a three-way tie, with Ohio State falling at Rutgers. Really feels like it's a three-team race heading down the stretch. Can't count out Ohio State or Michigan State completely, but the way Purdue played the other night, doesn't feel like they're going to lose many games here coming up. So just your overall take. I mean, let's start with Purdue, right? Like, they were one of the Big Ten favorites. I know you and I were debating whether Illinois or Purdue would be the team to win the Big Ten before the season. Man, they got Illinois' number, right? Like, why do you think Purdue has been so tough for not just everyone, but for Illinois, who I think is probably the second best team in the Big Ten?
I think Illinois actually matches up well with, or I guess Illinois matches up well with Purdue in terms of the teams that Purdue faces. But at the same time, I still think it's a bad matchup for Illinois, just because if it's going to come down to rebounding, Purdue's got the size, right? And I'll say this too. I mean, we could dance around it and get super granular, and I could present you with some sort of like laundry list of reasons why Illinois lost that game or why they don't match up with Purdue very well. But, the fact of the matter is Purdue's the best offense in the country, period. They just are. And it doesn't matter if you're Illinois or any other team in the Big Ten, that's going to present challenges. And when you factor their personnel in with even a guy like Matt Painter, who I think, and I've been saying this for a while, I think he's one of the best in college basketball at, out of timeout, just their structure and the way that they run certain things and their actions that they run. Were the Illini mistake free in that game? No, but you got to be near perfect defensively, and you have to make shots. And for a lot of teams, that's hard to do. And you saw it, just like Illinois does at times, where there's certain games where they have these lulls, and then in 5 minutes they blow the game open and it's over. They've done that this year. Purdue's the exact same way, and they're the number one offensive team in the country, efficiency-wise, but even just eyeball-wise. I mean, watch them. Every guy they put on the floor. This is the thing that blows my mind about Purdue. Every single guy, with the exception of Brandon Newman, who really isn't playing lately, every single guy they put on that floor can shoot it, with the exception of two guys. One is one of the best low-post threats in all of college basketball, and the other one is probably the best passing big in all of college basketball. And even he's shooting 4 for 10, 40%. They have 7 guys on their team, 7 that are shooting over 40%. And really, when you break it down, it's every single guy that plays. And what that does for Jaden Ivey, and what that does for Edey, and it's the reason why, okay, should we double? All these guys shoot the lights out. But part of it works, it's the chicken or the egg, because a lot of that is because of the personnel. And that's how I always say, it's the beauty of basketball. It's the sum of the parts at times. And it reminds me a lot, their shooting in particular reminds me a lot of the 2015, 2016 Indiana team. Yogi shot it well. Rob Johnson shot it well. James Blackman shot it well. Nick Zysloff shot it well. And then like guys like Max Bielefeld, right? All these different guys come in, and I think they had 5, 6, maybe 7 guys that shot over 40%, and they won the Big Ten, right? And I know they went down to North Carolina in the tournament, but this Purdue team, man, their offense, and it's not only just what they run or how they run it, it's the pieces. And no other team in college basketball, Illinois is close to that in terms of the offensive personnel that they can put out there and how they hurt you in a lot of different ways. But right now, Illinois doesn't have a top 5 pick. Yeah. When all else fails, we got this guy in transition, and it's tough to beat, man. And you really, you played great in the first half. You take a 2-point lead. They're that type of team where in 5 minutes they can blow it open. That's exactly what happened.
Where would you rank Jaden Ivey in your draft prospects? I think I'd take him over Matherin. I'd take him over Johnny Davis. Definitely take him over Keegan Murray. Ty I haven't seen enough of, but I think I would take Jaden. I know there's things about me. I was watching him in the first half, and he wasn't interested in defense. I think he will get interested in defense at the next level, at least enough, because he should be good. He should be really good on the defensive end. But boy, there's an explosiveness, just athleticism, speed, and then that size, and he's a good shooter. So I think he'd probably be the top guard in the draft, right?
I agree. I think right now, and I saw some people the other day maybe it was Chad Ford mentioning, hey, he's in the running now for the number one pick. That's Chet Holmgren, in my opinion. I know he's out in Spokane, and Gonzaga, as good as they are, they still don't really get a ton of national love. What Chet Holmgren's doing has literally never been done in college basketball, ever. At his size, over 60%, over 40 from 3.5 blocks a game. No one's ever done it. And so I think he would be not my number one pick. I know Jabari Smith's going to be up there as well. But from a sheer guard standpoint, and honestly, probably a lot of what John Morant's doing this year is going to help Jaden Ivey in a lot of ways. You watch him, you say, man, electric in transition. He's a better shooter than Ja was in college. Right now he's shooting whatever he is, 42, 43% from three. And I think that was initially the knock on Io as well, because they were both end-to-end, two of the quicker players in college basketball. But I think the thing that separates Ivey, and I'll be honest, like a month ago, you asked me that question, I wouldn't have been sure if he was the first guard taken, because I think with him, what's frustrated me with as explosive of an athlete as he is, he ends up on the ground all the time.
Yeah.
Like, he's always driving and ends up on the ground. I think it stops him from being able to finish at a very, very high level, which I know he can do. And the other thing too, I think when you look at him, he's 6'5", 200 pounds, and he kind of has all the makings where, yes, great in transition, is a great kind of spot shooter, end of shot clock type shooter. I think he can be a really, really high level defender at the next level. I really do. He has all the tools. He has the quickness. He has the hands. He has the length. He has all of that. So I think if you're an NBA team, you not only look and say, hey, we love what he has on the offensive end, but hey, if we can bring him in, and even on a team that may have a couple guys that you go to offensively, because that's the NBA. It just is. No matter what team you go to, even if it's the 28th team in the league, they're going to have a guy that can put the ball in the basket. So if you can do these other things, i.e. Ayo Dosunmu, and prove your worth, I know Jaden's going to go a lot higher than Ayo did, but man, you could argue that next year Jaden Ivey would be playing similar minutes that Ayo's playing right now, which is crazy to think about. But that's the NBA. You find your role, right? Okay, if you don't want to guard, I don't know, man. We got other guys that can score. So, his electricity in transition, we mentioned it. I know I've talked about it ad nauseum, even probably in the last 2.5 minutes. But yeah, he would be my top guard right now. I really like Mathurin. Ty Washington's kind of slipped a little bit. But I think that at the end of the day, he'll be a top 3 pick in my opinion. Banchero's going to be up there as well. So really in that kind of in my 3, 4, 5 range, I don't see him slipping past 6 or 7.
I totally agree with you about Chet, by the way. Anyway, watching Evan Mobley, I think he's going to have a similar impact and it could be better offensively. So I know you get scared because he's so skinny. Kevin Durant's really skinny. he finds a way to add that man strength, and I think he'll be just fine. I think he just makes such an impact on every level of basketball that you can't pass on.
And I'll say this about Chet. I know this is a lot of NBA draft talk, but people wanted. I watched him in high school, and he's the next Kevin Durant. I'm sorry, there's one Kevin Durant. Okay, there just is, and it's the reason why he's the best player in basketball. The way I look at Chet Holmgren is like almost a better version of Kristaps Porzingis, which is, which really in reality, the way he can step out, the way he can protect the rim, that's saying a lot. I mean, Kristaps Porzingis, at one point before he's kind of had this litany of injuries, was a guy that you were holding in pretty high regard throughout the league. So, that's not, that should be pretty high praise for a guy like Chet. And if that's kind of his floor is Porzingis, then you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's pretty good comp. All right. Yeah. Let's focus on Illinois. People are like, why are you guys talking about this? I find it interesting. Purdue's really good. Really, really good. I still think Illinois is a very, very good team, Mike. But obviously they've played top 5 opponents 3 times at home, able to push Arizona to the brink, push Purdue into double overtime, not able to beat Purdue. Do they have that gear? Do you think they have that gear? And it might making too big of an example of that, because if they make some open shots, it's a much closer game. But I just, Purdue and Arizona are 2 of the top 5 teams in the country. I don't think Illinois is that, and that's okay. You can still win a Big Ten championship share. You can still make a Final Four with the right matchups, getting hot at the right time. There's better teams than you. It looks like with Arizona and Purdue right now.
Yeah, and I think if you structure right now, and I don't know what Lenardi's last bracketology was, But yeah, I mean, I think Illinois is right there, 3-4 seed probably right now. And honestly, that's a pretty darn good 3-4 seed. So I know it's really like Twitter was morbid after that, after literally a loss to, and I get the way it happened. It just kind of turned into a beating, but it's probably how Wisconsin fans felt. That's probably how Michigan State fans felt probably towards the end of that, where you think you're going to come in, Kofi's out, and you're going to win the game, and you don't. But I think this Illinois team, they're still trying to round into form a little bit. And I remember I said it however many podcasts ago. If you told me that Kofi was out, you told me Curbelo was out, you told me Trent Frazier was out, I still think that the one that hurts you the most, and I know Kofi played well, and you probably need him against Edey and Trevion Williams, but Trent Frazier, and if he doesn't play well, it's really hard for this team to hit their ceiling. He offers more than enough defensively, but offensively, he just didn't have it going. And those types of things happen. It's college basketball, and these guys are human. And it would be really hard to get on Trent about that after all he's really given to this team. But you saw Kansas City and how out of sorts his team looked when he was struggling. I mean, it just looks different. Just
a reminder to people, back-to-back 0-point games in Kansas City. So we can talk about, Curbelo coming back. Did he help the team? Whatever. He had 2 points against Purdue the other day. He had 0 in those 2 games in Kansas City. I agree with you, Mike. Like, he has to be good for this team to be good, just because, he's a very, very good player, and Curbelo can help you overcome those things. But it's kind of interesting. The nights they've struggled, I don't think it's coincidence that, he has struggled. Trent Frazier has.
Yeah. And I'll mention this about Trent. I said it before the game. It's just, you go on the road, you're playing a top 5 team and 2 really good college basketball teams like this, great players. They need to be great. And if they aren't, then it makes it that much harder for your team to try to win the game. I mean, go back and look at Purdue's 3 losses this year. If you want to talk about how to beat Purdue, right? 2 of those losses were on the road, right? Rutgers, Rutgers and I guess Indiana would be the last one. Finney plays over his head, right? He scores 20 points, and they didn't shoot it particularly well. Indiana didn't, but home court, right? Assembly Hall, one of the toughest places to play in the country. Illinois almost had them at home. Rutgers hits a half-court shot to beat them. Rutgers was a little bit, efficient, 7 for 14 from 3, but that's not really what they do. But when you're on the road, when you're in Mackey, if you want to win that game, odds are, most times, you need to have someone go nuclear. It just is. If all things are even, and that's exactly what Johnny Davis did, right? Johnny Davis goes out there and puts up 37 and 14, and it was the comment I made before the Purdue game and after the Wisconsin game. Did Wisconsin play particularly well that game? They didn't shoot it particularly well. I mean, they got rebounded by Purdue. It was Johnny Davis. He just literally took over the game, and that's what can happen. And that's why I truly think that if you're in this game, Curbelo, I thought he was solid. Kofi was solid. And if Trent has one of those Trent games where he goes on a flurry, gets on his heaters like we talk about, I think Illinois can come out of that game and win it. But it's hard too. We'll break it down in the film, and a lot of it's how they structure their offense. And there were some mistakes on Illinois' end, but the offense is structured so that you do make those mistakes. So yeah, I think for a guy like Trent, he's frustrated, right? You want to come in there and play well, and then you get dinged up. And I know that hurts. That hurts. When you get kneed right, by a Jaden Ivey coming full speed off a ball screen, right where he got kneed, man, that happened to me in high school.
I can't believe he came back in the game. Like,
I texted you. I said, I cannot believe he's in this game right now. And it's going to be one where I'm sure he woke up the next morning and was like, oh my God, he probably can't even believe how he was back in the game. But, hopefully this isn't one that lingers. It's a bone bruise. It's, right after he had that in Kansas City, I remember texting you, and obviously I'm no doctor, but that's what it looked like. And he came back, and so you don't want it to linger. And typically those bone bruises heal a little bit quicker than something that's more structural. So he'll be back. I would be shocked if he's not on the floor against Northwestern on Sunday, and they need him because Northwestern's starting to roll a little bit here.
Yeah. I do want to even this out. Like, Trent against Arizona was the reason you were in that game.
Yeah.
Right? At 27, Marquette, he was the reason you were in that game at 23. So he didn't always have bad games in their losses. So I just want to even that out. But, to beat a Purdue team, I think you have to have Trent Frazier play pretty well. Rebounding has become a little bit of an issue, Mike. Kofi does his job, right? Like, he led this game, I believe, for Illinois. And in rebounding, but I think they've been out rebounded. I'll have to look this up, but they've been out rebounded, I think, since January 1st in Big Ten games. So I'll look this number up. But Brad Underwood said we've gotten soft in rebounding, but they're also just playing small, right? DeMonte a lot at the 4. How big of a concern is that, or is that just Purdue being good on the glass, but Indiana out rebounded them, I believe? So how big of an issue is that for you?
It's an issue. Anytime a team like Purdue and you give them second chances, and I know they had 11 in the game, but it felt like every time they got it, Trevion Williams misses the free throw and ball gets pinballed around, gets 2 more, makes both of those, missed the previous 2. Ball gets batted around, Caleb First hits a 3. It's when you have the teams like this, when you give them more chances on the offensive glass, especially the number 1 offense in the country, they're going to make you pay. So yeah, I do believe it's an issue. Is it going to be an issue against certain teams in the Big Ten? Probably not. But if you want to achieve what you want to achieve and you want to win games in March and win the Big Ten tournament, then it has to get rectified. And I'm looking specifically, and I know Jacob Grandison, he's typically given up some size, and but Trent can't come out of that game 33 minutes, one rebound. Plummer can't have 0 rebounds in 32 minutes, and Grandison 2 rebounds. And the amazing thing, when you go back and when you watch the film, there are 2, and if the defensive rebounding is something that Brad Underwood wants to address, there are going to be 2 guys that you see playing a little bit more on this team who are great defensive rebounders, and it's RJ Melendez and Benjamin Bosmans-Verdonk. I thought Bosmans-Verdonk, and we can go off on a tangent there. I'll stick with the rebounding. I thought he was tremendous. I know he missed a bunny around the rim, but kept the ball alive. Plummer hits a 3, ripping balls out of guys' hands on the defensive glass. Great in the gaps when Jaden Ivey's trying to get downhill. I thought he was outstanding. And I know he played 6 minutes in the game. I think that's going to go up, and I think same goes for RJ Melendez.
Can I give Omar Payne some love too? 3 rebounds in 5 minutes. Like I thought when he and Bosmans came to the game in the first half, they battled, man. Like they are frustrating offensively, right? Both of them are frustrating offensively, but their job is to play defense and get some rebounds. They had 6 between the 2 in 11 minutes. It is 6 of the last 7 games they have been out rebounded, all against Big Ten opponents. They beat Michigan by 1. They beat Northwestern by 6 during this stretch. Northwestern's a team you have to out rebound coming up here on Sunday. But going back to Nebraska, they out rebounded them by 11. Maryland, which is a big team, they out rebounded by 18 when Maryland came here. Minnesota by 26. Missouri by 12. Right. Rutgers by 14. Iowa by 29. Mike, so like that's interesting how it's declined. I know these are better teams, but it also feels like it's on Illinois a little bit. Yeah,
and I think you got a guy like RJ Melendez who his confidence, you can see it's growing continually. I mean, there was a point at the end of the game where you talk about missing shots, and guys kind of not stepping confidently into shots. I thought in that second half, RJ Melendez hit that shot right in front of the bench for 3 towards the end of the game. And I don't know what Brad Underwood said when he turned around and looked at the bench, but I would imagine it's something along the lines of, that's how you step in to a shot confidently and knock it down. I mean, that's what that looked like. And look, the defensive rebounding, the beauty of this Illinois team and the reason why they can go 11 deep at times and kind of just have the luxury of saying, who's got it going this game, right? Like who's going to be great in their first couple of minutes so we can ride with you for the rest of the game. And I think those 2 guys in particular, when you're struggling to rebound with Kristaps Porzingis just got traded, by the way. When you're struggling to rebound, right, and you look at your starting 5 in particular, and you say, okay, man, how can we fix this? A lot of teams don't have the luxury to go into their depth to find defensive rebounding help, and that's what Illinois can do. I'm not saying RJ Melendez is going to play 30 minutes, and I'm certainly not saying Benjamin Bosmans-Verdonk is going to play 25, but he's going to be able to spell Kofi. Okay, and there's going to be times, depending on the matchups, where Benjamin Bosmans-Verdonk can play the 4 a little bit, right? Can play alongside Kofi because of his passing, because he's not a net negative offensively, and he can help. Kofi typically is wrestling with whoever the bigger guy on the other team is, so it may not be him getting the rebound, but if you can have somebody else come in there, track it down, and get the ball, those 2 valuable players if you're looking to fix that. Okay, now what Bosmans-Verdonk brings offensively, who knows, but he's not a complete 0 on that end. He's not. He's proven that he's not. And RJ Melendez certainly isn't. So those minutes are going to come from somewhere, and I'm excited to see them kind of fix that because they have the pieces to do it.
All right, Mike. I want to get to your thoughts on this crazy NBA trade deadline at the end of this, by the way. Nice that you mentioned Kristaps. Now he gets traded to the Washington Wizards of all places. So it's amazing how far he has fallen there. All right. Andre Curbelo comes into the game, gives you an offensive boost when you needed one. He's done that. He did that against Wisconsin in the first half, helped give you an offensive boost. What have you seen from him? And then I'll ask you about RJ Melendez coming up here. But what have you thought of Andre as he kind of puts himself in here? I mean, Purdue can't stop him. You got to give him that. Like, they can't stop ball screens, and that's where he is so good.
There's just not many college basketball defenses that can keep him out of the paint. And that's such a luxury. And I'll say this about Andre Curbelo. There is a big misconception about Andre Curbelo. Andre Curbelo is a scoring guard. He is. He's a scoring guard that makes some amazing passes. And I think he's going to need, he can get downhill on anybody. He can get past anybody. He can pro better than anybody. He can get into the paint better than anybody. I think his next step, as he continues to round into form and get his legs back under him, right now the easy thing for him is scoring. And that sounds crazy because scoring is not easy for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. But I always make the comparison where, think about like in gym class, right? The people that kind of aren't comfortable. I'm not saying Andre Curbelo isn't comfortable, but it's just getting shots up. They just get shots up. They're not going to make those reads. It's what they do. And like when he's coming back, okay, like coming in, he's been much more scoring oriented than he was even previously. And I think he needs to find a balance there. Some sort of balance to where, okay, I'm getting downhill and he can get into those 10 to 12 foot fadeaways, turnarounds anytime he wants. But part of being a point guard is really coming in and saying, okay, how can I get Jake going? Right? Like, how can I get Jacob Grandison going? Okay, if they're helping from the corner, hitting him. And I thought he had a couple turnovers. Trent also threw it. I thought DeMonte had some moments last night or on Tuesday night where just flowing with the ball, getting to that corner, not standing. We talked about that in Kansas City a little bit, and it started to rear its head a little bit in that game where guys start to stand. But I think for Curbelo, look, you see how talented he is end to end, how talented he is from that 10 to 12 feet. He's actually been shooting it a little bit better, a little bit more confidently, and that's going to be an interesting development a little bit. You don't want him to get carried away with it, but yeah, I mean, if you're going to help off of him in the corner, drive and kick, love that. Now, like, do you want him 6 times a game coming off ball screens and shooting threes? Probably not, because part of what makes him good, and Trent's done a really good job at this. Trent's really excelled and developed in the way that he is making reads off of ball screens and throwing to the back action, getting downhill, guy helps in, making those drives and kicks. Andre's great with the home run play. He just is. And he makes those, and those are ones that get clipped and sent out, and Sports Center top 10, whatever you want to call it. But making the simple reads, and I'm not saying he's not doing it, because he is, if he wasn't scoring the ball and not making the simple reads, now you're wondering kind of what he's giving you offensively. He's been shooting free throws well. He's been scoring. But if he can put it together and not come out of a game where he plays 21 minutes and has 0 assists, then I think this Illinois offense especially hits another gear.
Yeah, I'm firmly in the camp of, and I think you are too, Mike, of they need Andre Curbelo to hit another gear, because he can just do things nobody else on this roster can. But there are people that see Illinois, the turnovers he'll have or some defensive issues he'll have, and they could make a case. I'm not making this case, but if they wanted to make a case that this team is better without Andre Curbelo, they could throw at me this: Illinois is 4-5 with Andre Curbelo playing. Okay. And in, let's see, 5 of those games, he has an O rating, offensive rating under like 80. Okay. So what would you say to those people who throw that out there? Because, like, they're 4-5. That's a true number. I would say 2 of those games are against Purdue. 1 is against Arizona. The Marquette game, you didn't have Kofi. The Maryland game, you didn't have Kofi, and turns out Andre Curbelo had COVID. So I would put those things in there for nuance. But if people want to make that case, I guess they can at this point. But I just think he needs to get into a rhythm. He needs to figure out his team. And once they do, I think he'll be better. But there are some doubters out there, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and we have eyes too. It's not pretty all the time. It isn't. And I think that's part of him still trying to figure out, when you came in, that was the big thing. The first however many games of the season he played before he was out was I don't think he really knew who he was on this team. He knew who he was last year because it was pretty clear it was Ayo, Kofi, and then he was just kind of that. He really was. He was kind of that third guy most of the time that could come in and change the pace, and people loved him in that role, right? And then now, I think he thinks he has to overhaul things, and you saw that against Marquette. You saw that in some different games this year with some of the turnovers, where it's like, hey, you may not be that guy right now, but that's fine. I think that one of the more underrated aspects of college basketball teams and what makes teams win and what makes teams lose is role identification. There's no team that does it better in the country than Wisconsin. It's like part of the reason why they win is because you can achieve so much more when every single guy on your team knows exactly what they're doing, who they are. It just makes you that much more dangerous. It was actually Wisconsin's downfall last year. They didn't really know who was who. Was it Dimitri Trice? Was it Potter? Like, who's the guy here? And there's just all this imposter syndrome all over the place. And for Curbelo, I think it's a little bit similar where it's, okay, I'm scoring. Like he comes back, he's scoring a little bit more. But you're a point guard. And if you're going to run a lot of high ball screen stuff, then you have to figure out a way to get these other guys involved. And that's not to say, hey, man, stop scoring, because you can do those things. And part of his scoring and downhill nature is going to draw attention. But it's just thinking the game in a sense where it's like, you know what? I'm coming into the game, and I know that this team, when Jacob Grandison and DeMonte Williams and Trent Frazier are going, we don't lose many games. So how can I help there, right? If you need me in moments like the end of the Purdue game where you need someone to kind of take over and get to the basket and put it in the hole, he can do that, and he's proven he can do that. But these other guys need to be feeling good, and they need to be involved, and it's on the point guard to do those things, right? And Trent, that's what Trent, like I said, he's gotten so much better at that. And part of it too is making shots. Those guys are 2 for 14. Grandison, Williams, Frazier, 2 for 14 from three. And I know Curbelo probably had a couple of those swing passes, and they make a couple threes. Curbelo might have 4 assists, and we're saying like, oh yeah, like 15 points, 4 assists, pretty good. But you want to see him actively doing those things and looking for it. And he may be, and then maybe just shots aren't going in. But for a point guard of his caliber, it needs to be obvious sitting there watching, like, man, he is seeking his teammates and wanting to get them involved, because he knows if those guys are hitting their apex, then this team does.
All right. So RJ Melendez, before this recent 4-game stretch, 2 minutes over 6 games. Last 4 games, 37 minutes. Now, all of his points against Purdue are in garbage time, right? But you're given that garbage time, and he did something with it. And Brad Underwood also just threw him out on Jaden Ivey in the first half. And I've been interested, Brad Underwood, the game against Northwestern, you're down 5, and you just throw Brandon Podziemski and RJ Melendez in. It's kind of like the sink or swim, right? And give those guys credit. Luke Goody against Michigan State did this too. They swim, right? They doggy paddle sometimes, but they find a way to stay above water and help their team. On a scale of 1 to 10, Mike, 10 being ridiculously excited, how excited should Illini fans be about RJ Melendez right now?
11. I mean, and the reason why, and I don't want to just be like drinking the Kool-Aid here, but he is somebody that this team has not had. And when I say that, it's a 6'7" guy that can shoot it, athlete, great in transition, can guard. Who's the last Illinois player that's been like that? It feels like it's been a long time since there's been that type of guy. Like, he is a guy that, as you projected out, the way his game is so polished, he can score the heck out of the ball. You see him come in to the Missouri game, and dude, that is just not easy. Like, you've been sitting all game, you're cold, you're like, your fingers are cold, your feet are cold, and like, he's just he looks like just kind of a natural born scorer who can get to the spots, right? He gets to his spots, and there should be a lot of excitement around this kid. And that's not to say, hey, now hold him in regard of like an NBA lottery pick, because I do think down the road he projects as an NBA type player. He can handle it, right? He can shoot it. And I'll show some stuff in the film. He may be the best defensive rebounder Illinois has. I truly say, when it comes to really going and getting it, it is like, he has some defensive rebounds, and he had one in the second half against Purdue where I literally was like, whoa.
I turned to Joey and gave him like, wow. Because it's been a while since we've seen a guy just go sky and grab it, and he can run it up there if he needs to, right? Like, it's there's flashes of brilliance there, but he plays like a freshman sometimes, which should be expected.
Yeah, and I think the next step for him, and he's shown that he is willing to stick his nose in there, but on a Brad Underwood team, it's just, hey, you always got to be willing to do the tough stuff all the time. And I think a lot of times that's the biggest transition for freshmen, any freshman. That's the hardest thing. Like, whoa, if I want to get on the court, it's not just about putting the ball in the basket. You know, it's not just about flying around getting rebounds. Like, you have to do those tough things, and these freshmen will come along and continue to do those things. And RJ Melendez, seriously, like I think Brad Underwood mentioned, and the word that you can use is like he's going to be a star. Like he is. He's going to be a star. And I think
drinking the Kool-Aid. I love it.
I just think when you look at this team and what they could potentially lose, to be able to have a guy like RJ Melendez, who, you know, and I know there were a lot of people that were excited about Coleman Hawkins, and I know he's had a rough go of it, and I've said it before, it's not an easy position to be in. But having a guy like RJ Melendez who can soften the blow of some departures, then, you know, you go out and you go to the transfer market, wherever, and then a lot of these guys develop. He's a guy that I truly believe you're going to see. He may end up this year playing 6 minutes a game, right? But that is going to skyrocket. It may end up skyrocketing towards the end of the season the more that he gets confident. Because if you see Brad Underwood putting that guy in, it's the same thing with Billy Donovan and Ayo Dosunmu. If you see him putting a freshman in on Jaden Ivey, there is a lot of trust there, and there's a lot that coach likes, and I think it's for good reason.
Just to make the comp, I think, you know, people were excited about Coleman Hawkins, the idea of him, right? I do think we've seen way more flashes out of RJ, right, than we saw out of Coleman last year. So yeah, my expectations for RJ would be much higher than even Coleman coming into this year, because you hoped Coleman could be that 4, but now you have RJ already kind of stealing, it feels like, Coleman's minutes.
Yeah, and RJ too, it's a mixture of a lot of things. It's, you know, when you look at some of the things that he does on the floor and how natural it looks, and a lot of that is just like his length and his athleticism, and I mentioned the word natural. That's just what it is with him. It doesn't look herky jerky. It looks fluid. He's a very fluid athlete. You know, those are the types of things that project, right? And those are the types of things that translate. And then it's just kind of a matter of, hey, I throw you in against Northwestern, him and Podziemski. Part of the reason is just when you're a freshman, you're still kind of coasting off that high school confidence. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, and then you have this kind of irrational confidence. It's almost like Coleman Hawkins in a sense. It's the sophomore year tends to be the time where you can get beaten down a little bit because you think, hey, I'm a freshman. I'm going to turn the corner, and this guy's going to leave, and this guy's going to leave. And then all of a sudden, it's not the way you thought. And then you really lose confidence in that second year. RJ Melendez right now, these freshmen, you see, they just thrown in. They're like, yeah, no, we can hoop. You know, and it's really, really cool to see. But yeah, like there's certain things for him that just look fluid and look natural. And man, there aren't many defensive rebounds that guys get where you're just kind of blown away. I'll pause it. I mean, anyone that sticks around for the film session, I'll pause it. His head is like above the backboard, and his arm, I don't know what his wingspan is. It looks like it's
7 foot.
It looks like it's near 7 foot because the way he snares some of those rebounds, like it's almost like it's like Inspector Gadget. Like he just kind of like sticks his arm in there and just pulls it out. And man, I could go on and on about RJ Melendez. And I know we're talking about a kid that played 10 minutes against Purdue. And
so that would be my follow-up question. I am excited for the long term of RJ Melendez. There's some fans that want 20 minutes a game. What do you think is his role moving forward?
I think I really do. I think he'll creep up to the 14, 15 range, depending on game script. And if he comes out and hits 2 threes as soon as he gets in, makes a couple defensive plays, you may see a game where he plays 21 minutes. But the reality is with this team, DeMonte, Jake, Plummer, Frazier, you know, you go on that list, Curbelo, Kofi, you can't just start buying minutes, right? You know, it's the minutes are what they are for a lot of these guys. And some of that is just kind of giving him this confidence and burst, which may be good. And I think sometimes you can protect a freshman in that way, where you're not like, hey, let's throw you to the Wolves for 30 minutes and expose you a little bit. Because there's just certain guys, and even I think Andre Curbelo in a certain way falls under this umbrella where, yeah, he may look better in 12 minutes than 30 minutes. As crazy as it is to say, you know, there's certain guys that are just better in spurts. that are just better in small doses in a sense. And I think for a guy like RJ Melendez, that's what you're going to see this year. What happens beyond this is who knows? Because the other thing you got to look at defensively, I still think there's room for improvement off the ball, right? He gets caught underneath the basket and guys that are coming off screens. He's still working through that, but I think he moves his feet well on the ball. But three fouls in 10 minutes. I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing for freshmen. I remember my freshman year, we played against Alabama State. It was one of the first games. I was in the rotation. I was playing. I looked up midway through the second half. I'm like, how do I have 4 fouls right now? That's like, you just, because that's what's going to happen. RJ, like, these freshmen will get targeted. Certain things will be ran at them. It's that you don't get as good of a whistle. A reach in for RJ Melendez is different from a reach in for Trent Frazier. It just is. Was that a foul on RJ Melendez when he reached on Jaden Ivey up top? I don't know. It wasn't on DeMonte Williams. When DeMonte Williams bear hugged him in the second half, they didn't call that. So it's a real thing. So no, I think those minutes do creep up to 14, 15. And part of that isn't just his offensive package. Part of that's because he rebounds at a high level. Yeah. And I think that's what this team needs right now. So you're going to steal a few minutes from probably some other people, but it's certainly not going to pass 20, I would imagine. But he's going to have some more here and there.
Yeah, I mean, everything we thought about with Coleman, it's like, hey, they need length. They don't have anybody like that on the roster. Well, maybe RJ can be that guy for those kind of minutes. And he's responded, man. He is worth being excited about. All right, Mike. So you lose to Purdue. The defense had its worst half of Big Ten play. Probably chalk a lot of that up to Purdue, right? But what can Illinois correct, learn? I know we'll dive into the film, but what are Underwood's points? Is it flush this game? We're 10-1 against the rest of the league, or what can they learn from that?
Well, offensively, it comes down to in those games, you got to make shots. And I know that sounds like somewhat of a cop-out or super simple. But in those games, you do. You really have the chips stacked against you when you're not making shots, playing against an offense like that. But, I'll say this too. We've mentioned time and time again, and I'm not singling out Alfonso Plummer because it's a lot of guys, and a lot of guys had some defensive lapses. But making sure that against a team like that, it just has to be a full 40 minutes. It does. And you cannot have 5 to 7 minute stretches, whether that's dry spells on the offensive end or, and those happen, but defensively, you can always find ways to stay focused and locked in. And Alfonso Plummer kept them in the game in the first half, period. He did. But those first couple minutes in the second half were tough, and they went at him. I mean, they went at him. The opener for the second half for Purdue was an Eric Hunter ball screen, left hand going downhill. And we'll get into the Spain action that they run and why they make it difficult. But those are certain things where if I'm Alfonso Plummer, it's just, and we mentioned in the film breakdown of Alfonso Plummer going into the year, it's not a ability thing. It's a focus thing. It is. And there's times where he can just kind of get a little spacey in a sense would kind of be the best way for me to describe it. And if he can turn a corner there, I know we're getting into mid-February here. I know we've been talking about it for a lot of the season, but he's shown in flashes, and maybe this game is a wake-up call where it's like, hey, man, you can do all the amazing things offensively, but if you don't guard and if you get lost and if you don't pitch in rebounding, then this is not going to look good. And but yeah, I mean, I think you look at the film and there's certain things that you say, hey, maybe next time around when you play Purdue, these are the things that we can do. But, Purdue just makes it tough on you. And I could talk about scheme and this and that, but I'll go back to what I said before the game. Both teams are going to have a good game plan. They are. It's a massive Big Ten matchup. It's against two really good teams. Game plan. These are two of the best coaches in the country. I really thought if Brad Underwood won that game, he'd have a legitimate case, and I still think he does. If they win the Big Ten or get close to be a coach of the year, given all the illnesses and guys that he's had out. But game plan is going to be great. We know that. Great players. You just, in those moments, and it's not an indictment on Trent Frazier. How could it be? Because of all he's done this year. But in those games, it's hard to have a tough offensive game and think that you're going to come out and win it. So you go back in, there's a chance you'll see them about a month from now.
Yep.
And there could be a good chance you see him again in a month and a half from now, or whatever that's going to be, a month and 3 weeks in the NCAA tournament. So, you got to find ways to be creative, and maybe that's more than 6 minutes for Benjamin Boston-Verdonk. And I don't want to come away from this saying, how do we beat Purdue? It's more Boston-Verdonk, because that sounds insane, but there's certain things that he adds that helps shield things defensively, especially on the glass, that will allow this team to say, hey, now we just got to knock down some shots, and they're capable of it. So I want to see another matchup against Purdue. I think Illinois can get them, but they're a tough matchup for everybody.
Yeah, in Indy, that would be electric with those two fan bases that care so much about basketball. That'd be a lot of fun. All right, the upcoming week, Mike, as we get out of here, Northwestern, Rutgers. Northwestern at home, got to win. Rutgers on the road. The RAC's a tough place to play, man, is Ohio State, and it's probably Big Ten title hopes found out last night. But those are two games. If you want to win a Big Ten title, you got to win. So what's the key?
You mentioned the RAC. I mean, we talk about Indiana. I know, like, historical Big Ten, Indiana, Purdue, Mackey. Rutgers is in the Big Ten now, and the RAC's probably a top 3 toughest place to play in the Big Ten.
Why?
I don't know. I remember everybody probably remembers the NBA 2K 3 overtime game, NBA 2K stat lines that were in the 3 overtime game in 2016. I was redshirting that year.
It was a classic. I've been talking about that game for 6 years. It was
it's like you look at the stat sheet, like, makes no sense. It's like, Malcolm has like 35 and 14. Mav has like 26 and 12. Coleman Land hits 6 threes. Corey Sanders has like 39, 12 and 9. And then we go into 3 overtimes. That gym, it's small for one. So small equals loud most times. It's hot. It's just like, I don't know if it was just the game we played there. I only went out there one time. The whole arena smells like bus fumes. Like, it's just, it's a weird place to play. And, the crowd's kind of right on top of you in a sense. It's an odd layout. And, I just think there's certain places that you play. It's almost like the really aesthetically pleasing, beautiful, the Shot or Nebraska's arena. All those are actually pretty easy places to play in. I know Illinois has kind of had some shaky Nebraska trips, but some of those arenas are, you feel comfortable. The NBA arenas, like, they're just like, oh, this is beautiful. Like the crowd's nicely spread out. But some of these weird, funky places like the RAC, where it's an odd structure and students are kind of right on you, it makes it tough. But also they play with a different edge at home. And that's the one thing. And, you go back to Piscataway last year, Mulcahy won that game for them. DeMonte gets the flagrant foul. They kind of lost their heads. Curbelo was turning it over, fouls out. There was just certain things that happened in that game. And then also, I forget what the score ended up being. I think he gave up 92 points in that game. It was insane what they did defensively, and how Rutgers played. But in Northwestern too, Northwestern has proven, 59-51 or 58-51, whatever they beat, whatever they beat Indiana by, they're down for a slugfest. Let's go. Let's play in the 50s. And that's part of the reason why they almost got you in Evanston. So you're going to want to make shots, keep going to the big fella for sure against a Northwestern team. But if you want to beat Northwestern and beat them enough to where you're not hanging around and at the last media saying, man, they're still right within 4 points, you got to make shots. You just have to. So, those are kind of the two things for Rutgers. Rutgers, you got to bring the edge for both games. But Northwestern, for sure, you're going to the big fella. It's what worked in Evanston. And then you got to have a little bit, that wasn't Trent's best game either. So hopefully he has a little bit of a bounce back there. So knocking down shots, obviously, but finding ways to create those open looks. It's going to be through the big fella. It's going to be, hey, if we're going to run some high ball screen stuff with Andre Curbelo in, we got to be looking elsewhere. If you can get downhill and get a point blank layup, great. We can have the turnarounds and the floaters anytime we want, but let's get other guys involved. Let's get DeMonte feeling good. Let's get Jake feeling good. And that's going to put you in a position not only to beat Northwestern, but get to Rutgers, do all those things and the hard stuff. And, 2-0 week here. I know Northwestern and Rutgers it's not the two eye-popping teams, but these would be two huge wins when it comes to not only just NCAA tournament, but Big Ten race. I mean, you're right there. And I 15-5 is probably going to do it.
Yeah. And Purdue's got at Michigan, right? That's not going to be an easy one. And Wisconsin, they just keep winning. they just keep winning, but they're at home against Rutgers, at Indiana. They got one of the easier schedules, but they still got Purdue at home, Michigan at home as well. So you just got to keep putting pressure on those teams because they'll keep putting pressure on you. I do want to ask you about the NBA trade deadline, Mike, because we're kind of watching this and it just expired. Ben Simmons for James Harden gets done. Seth Curry also going to Brooklyn. I love this basketball deal for both teams. I just think Brooklyn becomes more, at least on paper. We got to know how Simmons and Irving and all of it work. But on paper, all of those pieces work. Seth Curry gives him a shooter to fill in for Joe Harris. And then Philadelphia, like James Harden is not what he was a couple years ago. But if they get engaged James Harden, along with Maxey and Tybal and Harris and of course Embiid, maybe the MVP of the league, I think those teams could win the East. Though I'm not counting on Milwaukee yet, but I like it for both teams. It's weird that both teams made each other stronger as they're trying to win the East.
Both teams got better. I think you're right. I would honestly say the Nets probably got even better than the 76ers because it'll be interesting. I want to see how that fit is with Embiid and with Harden. But with a guy like Simmons, and I know there are a lot of question marks around what's he going to, who's he going to be? What's he going to be? The thing that he knows that he's not is he's not one of the best two players on that team. And that's fine. I think Ben Simmons as a third option is really good. The guy's an all-star. He's a top 5 defender in the league. I think that's what people forget. His floor is first team all-NBA defense. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's a really good playmaker. So I think a lot of teams would take that. I think we all get caught up in the passing up on a dunk against the Hawks type of stuff. But, his career as a whole proves that he's a good player. And I'm a fan of Ben Simmons in terms of his game and what he brings. And I was waiting for somebody to deal for him because I think it would make their team better. And this Nets team in general. And I truly believe this. There are 2 key pieces to this trade. And it's probably the reason why it happened. And it's part of the reason why one guy was probably left out of the trade. And they're both pretty much similar players. And now they get to play together. I believe, just a thought on my end, the person that made this trade possible and the reason this all went down was Seth Curry. I think that Sean Marks said, you got to give us Seth Curry or we're not doing this. Simmons, sure. A couple other ancillary pieces, sure. But I think it was Seth Curry. And the reason why this was going out throughout the week is I don't think Daryl Morey wanted to give him up. Yep. And that's part of the reason why Patty Mills wasn't involved in the deal. Because I think Sean Marks probably holds Patty Mills in the same regard that probably Daryl Morey holds Seth Curry. But the reason why Patty Mills is still in Brooklyn is it was probably non-negotiable because Steve Nash has mentioned what Patty Mills means to that locker room. And I think with a team that you're bringing in Simmons, you got Durant, Durant kind of goes to the beat of his own drum. We know for sure Kyrie Irving goes to the beat of his own drum. So right now you're in a situation where you keep Patty Mills, good locker room guy. And oh, by the way, you just added the best, I say this, I know his brother is the best shooter ever, but by percentage, Seth Curry, I believe, I think he's still above Steve Kerr. I'm pretty sure he's the best 3-point shooter percentage-wise in NBA history. So you got him. You got Joe Harris coming back from this ankle injury. You got Kevin Durant, who's one of the best shooters in the NBA, right? And you got Patty Mills, and you got Kyrie Irving. So this team, and now you got Simmons, and you surround him with all these shooters, which is the exact reason why it's almost like, hey, if Draymond Green wasn't a thing, Simmons would probably be really great in Golden State. Would be really great for the Warriors. He's going to need to play on a team that has space. And that's exactly what this Nets team offers. And, as we were sitting here doing this podcast, I was borderline distracted because it was just, Dennis Schroeder, is getting traded and all these guys are getting sent elsewhere. And that's what you love, right? There was a point during the NBA trade deadline, you're like, man, is the best thing we got Sabonis going to the Kings, like Dante DiVincenzo and Marvin Bagley headlining a 4-team trade? And then you get just fireworks, and now you got Woj dropping Woj bombs that aren't even actual deals. It's just teams that aren't dealing anybody. He just put out a tweet that says, no deals for the Knicks, sources tell ESPN. Yeah. And I think he's just going through every team. Jeremy Grant staying still, which I would have been a really great fit for the Bulls, in my opinion, if they could have pulled it off. But
I want
A
to
lot
ask
of
you that.
craziness.
I want to ask you that, Mike. They're the one team in the East that didn't make a move. Of course, you have Lonzo coming back. You have Caruso coming back. Patrick Mills or Williams, sorry, is coming back at some point. I get it. If you're the Bulls, do you want to, knowing what the East is right now, which Brooklyn and Philadelphia got better. You have a 2-year window here with Vooch and DeRozan to compete, but you feel like you get those guys back, maybe you can, but they also don't seem to want to mortgage the future and think the upside of trading a Patrick Williams for Jeremy Grant or Harrison Barnes, it isn't as good as say, hey, we'll just add a buyout guy, whether it's Goran Dragic or some big that can help them out a little bit. They just didn't see enough upside in the short term to get rid of somebody. Obviously, they really like in Patrick Williams.
Yeah, I think right now they're probably playing the game of let's hold the fort down. We got some guys coming back from injury. We're in a good spot. Patrick Williams, hopefully, obviously, at some point is coming back. But it's funny. There's one guy that he actually got dealt today that I was like, man, he'd actually be a pretty solid piece, and it's Thad Young. Like, right? Like, I think he'd actually, I know he doesn't offer exactly what Patrick Williams offers in terms of the upside, but just the dependability and what he can do.
The problem is because they traded him in the DeRozan deal, the only way they could have gotten him is if Thad Young got traded and he was cut. But it seems like who's the team that got him from the Spurs?
Raptors.
The Raptors are probably going to keep him, right? Because they gave up a first round for him, I imagine.
Yeah, no, they're going to keep him, and that's what I'm saying. Like a Thad Young would have made sense. It doesn't make sense, and it couldn't happen obviously because he was involved in that DeRozan trade. But yeah, no, I think you look at a team and the congratulations, Bulls fans. You may end up getting a 1 or 2 seed, and here you go. You're playing the 4 seed Brooklyn Nets, right? To try to get to the conference finals, and that's the thing. That's what's really interesting about this Nets team. It's the fact that okay, you're in a situation where I believe they're the 8th seed right now.
Yeah.
They're gonna make their way up, okay, and I think as far as they fell in these past 3.5 weeks, they can rise probably just as fast over these next, however many months that the season's lasting. They can end up, they can probably honestly, with how close things are, they could probably get back up to a 1 seed, if they really turn things around. But I think it's unfortunate for the Miami Heat, for the Chicago Bulls, for the Milwaukee Bucks, where
Cavs.
The Cavs, have this great year, and they go out and get Karis LeVert, their win now, and now you got the Brooklyn Nets lurking with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and Seth Curry and Patty Mills and Ben Simmons, and they may be a team that, I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought Kyrie Irving, the whole big thing was that if the Nets got the 1 seed, that he could only play, I guess he can only play a certain amount of games in the series, which I believe would only be, 3? I guess he would only be able to play the 3 road games because he can't. Can he play in Brooklyn now?
Not yet, but they might lift their vaccine mandate at some point, right? So
right
now, if they lift that, which everything seems to be getting lifted right now, which is a great sign, right? Like all of a sudden he's available for all the games, right? So all of a sudden Brooklyn stock way up.
And even if they don't do the vaccine mandate or they don't get rid of the vaccine mandate, now you got Kyrie Irving as a potential 4 seed who now in the conference semis, you're playing against the Bulls. And now he can play 4 games in Chicago and only 3 games and miss 3 games in Brooklyn. So I'm not saying that was their plan because that would be just an absolutely egregious plan to have. But the NBA, I almost feel bad. I mean, the people that refuse to watch the NBA or think it's not good basketball for whatever reason,
they had this 20-year-old notion of what the NBA is, right? Like where it's like, listen, after Jordan retired and all that, and NBA was brutal. Like when Jordan was there, it was just a lot of physicality. It became a lot of and one. Like there was a lot of and one influence in there. There's a lot of selfish basketball. It is beautiful ball now. Like the Harden stuff bothers me sometimes, but they're trying to get rid of that, like the fouling and all that. But it is just such high level athletes and skill right now in the NBA.
The quality of player in the NBA right now is higher than it's ever been. And I'm not sure it's really close. You have certain guys in this league that, you transport them back to, you transport Donovan Mitchell back to 1990, and he's probably the best player in the league. I mean, it's crazy to think about just how, whether it's modern technology and guys being able to recover and longevity and certain strength training things. And that's why I think you can never, I know people tend to go back and watch the 1950s and 60s and say, like, why is Bob Cousy just dribbling with one hand? And like, he would never play in the NBA nowadays. And it's like, well, I don't know. You give Bob Cousy or, any of these guys like modern day technology and strength training, and it looks different. So it's
think of Joel Embiid. Like, his body type is like Patrick Ewing, but his game is just so much better. Like, and Patrick Ewing's a Hall of Famer, one of the greatest basketball players ever, right? Especially when you include college. Like, Joel Embiid is just at a completely different level.
And the thing I love about the NBA, especially now, there was this notion maybe 4 years ago where it's like big men are eradicated. There are no more big men. And now you talk about the two leading MVP guys right now are Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid. It's like turning into, it's not necessarily a big man's league, but it's a skilled big man's league. Like if you're a certain guy like Nikola Jokic, there's nobody in the NBA that has more touches per game than Nikola Jokic. And how you now see this shift of a guy that can truly orchestrate an offense at 7 feet, right? And he's not a guy that breaks you down off the dribble. So how does that happen? And it's just fascinating the way that a lot of these, NBA teams, and it's funny, a lot of these college basketball, you watch college basketball and there's certain plays that are ran and you're sitting there saying, man, that's beautiful. The Spain action that Purdue runs, we'll break it down in the film. It comes from the EuroLeague. The NBA adopted it. The Suns run it all the time with Chris Paul, Booker, and Ayton. And college basketball starts using it. There's a lot of trickle down. That beautiful basketball that you see in college basketball, a lot of it comes from the NBA and sometimes will come from the EuroLeague in Europe. So, I mentioned the quality of player, and man, John Morant's going to put his name in the hat for MVP, and it's been amazing to see how he's exploded, and you still got Steph Curry, and LeBron James is, doing what he's doing in year 19. And it's a really exciting time to be an NBA fan, and the NBA trade deadline, it reminds me, it's like free agency. Like, to me, one of my favorite parts of the year is NBA free agency. It's the best. Like, it's the absolute best.
There's no drama. There's no drama like the NBA moves. Like,
no, and I'm an NBA nerd. I since I was 5 years old, I've done mock drafts. I'll write down all my mock drafts, and just in the last 6 years, I'll write down every single unrestricted free agent and free agency, and just kind of guess fit and where they end up, and go back and see how many of them actually happened. And that type of stuff's fun. And I think there's a lot of drama in the NBA, and I think it's fun to follow, man.
Yeah, and here's the other thing I think a lot of college fans get. Not all of them, right? But like some college fans feel like the NBA player is selfish, is making too much money. That's what they're worth, man. Like, who do you want making, the billions of dollars this TV revenue is worth? Who do you want making it? The owner or the guy who's, making all these tickets? Like, Kevin Durant is worth probably $100 million per season. Like, he's probably worth that. He gets paid like $50 or $60 million, right? Like that's what these guys are worth now. And I just think, as you said, like, if people think this is all like just one-on-one stuff, yeah, James Harden can do that, but he also was one of the assist leaders, right? The Phoenix Suns, the Golden State Warriors, watch them play ball. Milwaukee, what a great team that is. That's what I like what we're getting now, Mike, is how many teams you can actually see competing for a championship. Like, there's like 6-8 teams right now I think have a chance to win a championship. I think that's what was bad about the NBA, even though LeBron, Golden State, awesome to watch, but like, you knew who was going to be there at the end. Right now, you don't know who's going to be there at the end.
Yeah, and I think, like, I hear that all the time where it's like, oh, it's Cavs Warriors again. It's like, wow, how many times are the Patriots in the Super Bowl? It's just, it happens in every sport. People just get a little bit more upset about it in basketball. Yeah. And even in basketball, it's like, you're complaining about it now, but what about the Celtics and Lakers? You know what I mean? Like,
but the other thing about basketball is, why it happens? Because they're the best teams. And in the NBA, the best teams win. Like, unlike football and unlike baseball. Something.
and I'm a Warriors fan. And I know it sounds crazy. I was a Steph Curry fan at Davidson, so wherever he could have gone, the Minnesota Timberwolves had 2 chances to draft him. I'd probably be a Timberwolves fan nowadays. But he goes to the Warriors, and I suffered through some tough Warrior years. But man, if you are just getting your feet wet and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna go watch some NBA basketball. Watch the Golden State Warriors. It's not only just the beautiful basketball that they play with, and it's not just Draymond Green and Iggy and Steph and Clay and these guys. They play hard, man. Gary Payton Jr. or Gary Payton II, Damian Lee, all these guys. Otto Porter. I know Otto Porter got trashed, for his contract and with the Bulls and with the Wizards. And man, he took a small deal, right? He bet on himself and said, I'm gonna go to the Warriors. And that's what the Warriors do. Like, you enter the Warriors factory and come out with more value, like JaVale McGee did. I mean, a lot of those guys are like, oh, okay, now Quinn Cook's staying in the league. Right. I know he's out now, but he got himself a contract with the Lakers. And that's what basketball should be about, development. And, that's what you want out of your college basketball program. And that's what you see with some of these NBA programs. And Golden State is the biggest example of it. They take these laughing stocks like JaVale McGee, where you have this compilation on YouTube of him throwing the ball over the backboard. And he goes there and you're like, oh man, wait, he can help us win a championship because he protects the rim. He's a lob threat. And he's a good teammate, and he goes and he wins one with the Lakers. Mm-hmm. And what team is he playing for right now? The Phoenix Suns. So, it's amazing following those things and seeing like, man, this is what's valued in the NBA. And this, like, the cream rises in the NBA. Like, there are no, imposters in the NBA. It's just, if you are good, you will rise. And you mentioned James Harden. There are certain things defensively that I can't stand about James Harden, but you will be hard pressed to find a more offensively talented player in the NBA than James Harden. It is unbelievable what he does.
Best one-on-one player of all time, probably, right?
All time. Yeah. Him, Kevin Durant are up there where it's just, you kind of have no defense for it. I think, isolation, yes, I still stand by the fact that fully all-encompassing offense in general, Steph Curry is the best offensive player of all time just because of the chain reaction of what he brings. I mentioned on the pod, like, their net rating during his slump and out of his slump is the exact same on offense because of the open shots he gives all of his teammates. Andrew Wiggins. I didn't even mention Andrew Wiggins. He goes to the Warriors and he's an all-star. He's an all-star starter. So, and he's shooting 41% from 3. And a lot of that is the Warriors and a lot of that's Steph Curry. So I go on and on about the NBA, but it is such an amazing product. And I know, like, if the, Celtics play the Hawks one night, you're on TNT, you're not going to clear your schedule because in your mind, it's a meaningless NBA game. But if you truly watch it, man, like the switching, the rotating, like, it's the reason why you may not notice it's because it's just so seamless. Mm-hmm. And there aren't many defensive breakdowns. So offense has to be that good. And for a lot of these guys, it is. And I'll tie it all back to Purdue, Illinois. You can have really good defenders like Trent Frazier. You can have really good defenders like DeMonte Williams. Better offense wins. Most times it does. It can beat better defense. And we saw that Tuesday night in Mackey, and that's typically what you see in the NBA.
Hour talking ball with Mike LaTulip. I love it. Thanks as always, man. We'll catch up next week with 2 must-win games for Illinois if they want to win a Big Ten title. We got Northwestern Super Bowl Sunday matinee, and then Rutgers at the Rack mid next week. Mike, we'll talk to you next week. Always appreciate it, man.
Awesome. Thanks, man.